new AI tool designed to crack down on fraud has helped the UK government recover almost 500 million over the last year.
Hello and good morning. This is AI with Kyle, and I'm going to be walking you through the daily AI news and updates of the day, as well as answering questions from the audience who are now coming in via TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. So we've got a few things happening. No gigantic news. I'd say the big news this week, and a lot of what's bubbling under the surface, is investment. So we talked yesterday about the somewhat circular investment between Nvidia and OpenAI and the creators of ChatGPT, with 100 billion being sent back and forward between the two companies. It's a form of financial alchemy. I actually covered it in the newsletter as well, basically with a, how can I describe it to TikTok, an elephant self-fillating itself. The money is rotating. So Nvidia are investing 100 billion into OpenAI. That money is then going to be spent on Nvidia chips. So it is a circular economy. I think the fact that it is a circle is one issue. What worries me more, though, is the dependence on OpenAI and everybody throwing their money into one part of the market, into OpenAI in particular, which gives me a little bit of concern because it means that the market itself is going to be fragile, and it is currently based on one company and one person, Sam Altman, sitting at the top of that company. And if that comes crumbling down for whatever reason, then the whole industry as a whole will be threatened. So it's great to see the investment going in. I wish it was just a little bit more distributed. I'd love to see Anthropic getting some of that money, for example, but instead everything is being thrown at Sam Altman and OpenAI. Speaking of Sam, let's go over to a blog article that he put out, which is related to all of this money that we're seeing being thrown around right now. He put out a blog article yesterday about abundant intelligence. So a redefining of artificial intelligence, AI, but the new acronym here, AI being abundant rather than artificial. So I'm going to go through it in detail because I think it's worthwhile looking at what the leader of AI is talking about and what he is aiming at. It's to do with getting more money put into the sector, and it's to do with basically spending your way to the next level of artificial intelligence, which I'm going to talk about has some potential difficulties. So, Abundant Intelligence by Sam Altman. Growth in the use of AI services has been astonishing. We expect it to be even more astonishing moving forward. As AI gets smarter, access to AI will be a fundamental driver of the economy and maybe eventually something we consider a fundamental human right. Sounds odd, but we do now consider access to the internet. Almost everyone will want more AI working on their behalf. To be able to deliver what the world needs, for inference compute to run these models and for training compute to keep making them better and better, we're putting the groundwork in place to be able to significantly expand our ambitions for building out AI infrastructure. The world needs this. This is a fundamental human right. Therefore, we, OpenAI, and myself, Sam Altman, I'm going to step up and help people to achieve this basic human right. If AI stays on the trajectory that we think it will, then amazing things will be possible. Maybe with 10 gigawatts of compute, AI can figure out how to cure cancer. Or with 10 gigawatts of compute, AI can figure out how to provide customized tutoring to every student on Earth. If we are limited by compute, we'll have to choose which one to prioritize. No one wants to make that choice, so let's go build. So he's saying we will be able to solve these problems, and it becomes a decision of which problems do we throw our computing power at first and foremost. And that is, I agree, a very difficult decision to make. So he's saying we need more computing power. That doesn't necessarily make these problems go away. It's just we'll have other problems that we need to choose between. Our vision is simple. We want to create a factory that can produce a gigawatt of new AI infrastructure every week. That would be 50 plus gigawatts every single year being deployed. The execution of this will be extremely difficult. It will take us years to get to this milestone, and it will require innovation at every level of the stack, from chips to power to building to robotics. But we have been hard at work on this and believe it is possible. In our opinion, it will be the coolest and most important infrastructure project ever. We're particularly excited to build lots of this in the US. Right now, other countries are building things like chip fabs and new energy production much faster than we are, and we want to help turn that tide. When he says other countries here, it's China. There's one country. Yes, the UAE are putting a lot of investment into this space, but this is China. So other countries here is very specific. It's one country. Over the next couple of months, we'll be talking about some of our plans and the partners we are working with Nvidia to make this a reality, and Oracle. Later this year, we'll talk about how we're financing it. So he's saying, if you give us more money, we're going to build these data centers, which, as I said in the second paragraph here, is a fundamental human right, and we need to give access to artificial intelligence to humanity. This is our job, and we need to make sure we do it, not China, is basically what he's saying. But he's also saying this is how we make money as well. I think this is a clever little blog article. It appeases the financiers, the people who are going to be continuing to invest in this. But he's wrapping it up in this is not only a human mission for the good of humanity to cure cancer, to take us to other planets, etc., but it's also a US-centric mission. And it's one that's going to be good to our investors. So he's hitting all of the different stakeholders here, humanity as a whole, Americans, and investors. I think he's done a good job with this post. It does remind me of this image, though. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's a fake AI image of Sam Altman asking for, please, bro, we're so close to AGI. Just 20 trillion more, please, bro. So we are in a phase of artificial intelligence where it's about who can throw the most money at it right now. So we call it brute forcing. Brute forcing has worked for the last 10 years or so of this form of artificial intelligence, machine learning and generative AI in particular, and large language models, by just giving it more power, training on more data, building larger networks of larger vector databases basically, and having more linkages between these models. We do get more intelligent results. Nobody's 100% sure why, but it doesn't matter from an engineering point of view, because you just keep building and you keep scaling, and we start to see emergent properties. We start to see these models getting more intelligent just because we make them bigger and bigger, even if we don't fully understand what is going on. So this has worked for a while, but there are concerns that this will no longer be the case as we start to move forward. And lots of people talk about the kind of hitting a plateau, especially with large language models. So what Sam Altman is basically saying is we need more money and we need to keep investing. That's the same thing that Elon Musk is saying, and they are both now competing to build the larger data centers. So Sam Altman is doing it with SoftBank and Oracle, and they're doing the Starlink project, and Elon Musk is just doing it by himself, and he's building Colossus. I think it's Colossus he's building, and Mark Zuckerberg is talking about building, they all have silly names. I think it's Prometheus and Titan or something like that. They're all mythological names, which gives you an idea of the self-importance connected to these projects. So the thing about scaling laws is they have worked, and that's why our models keep getting smarter, because the model's getting bigger and more computers being thrown at them, and they are getting better. Every time a new one comes out, people are like, oh, it's stupid compared to the last model. That's not actually the case. It's just we are used to the older models and maybe using them in a certain way. Overall, when you step back, the model's getting smarter and smarter. The best way to check on this is to go back and use GPT-3. You can still access it. If you go back and use it, you will realize that, oh my God, we've come a long way in 2 years. We just get very used to it. We get entitled to the level of intelligence very quickly. However, that does not mean that this growth will go on forever. The scaling laws have been in play, but they may show diminishing returns, which means that just throwing more money, more GPUs, more compute, more electricity at the problem may not lead to the results that we're talking about, or Sam Altman is talking about here. So we have a few things that as we start to scale it up, obviously we're going to increase the energy cost and the compute cost and the GPU cost, so we need more money. The training run of a large language model has been going up and up and up. Used to be able to do it for a few million, no longer the case. It's way higher now, which basically means that's why you only have about 5 or 6 companies who are doing this in the West, and then 5 or 6 or so in China as well, who have the resources to be able to train frontier level models. It's also why Grok is quite impressive, because they managed to train something up via brute force in just a couple of years, whereas the other contenders in the market have been doing this for much longer. So if you have the cash, you get to play the game. If you don't have the cash, you're out of it. That's why in Europe and in the UK, we can make lots of noises about, oh, we're going to do this and that with artificial intelligence. But unless you have hundreds of millions to put into the training of these models, you are not in the game. You cannot compete. And we have a very small and increasingly smaller number of players. The One other big issue is that throwing more money and more energy and more compute at it doesn't fix fundamental underlying problems with large language models. So it doesn't fix hallucinations. It doesn't give the models any better grounding in the real world, and it doesn't lead them to be better reasoning. We need to also be working on those problems independently and combining them with the greater increase in compute power. So things like grounding in the real world, this is why you're starting to hear a lot more about training these models, like having them work as observers so they can watch people working, doing their tasks, and then learning from that. We're also talking a lot more about world models, which is simulating a physical world and allowing the AIs to play within that world, which helps them to learn what interacting with a physical world is. So that's why you're seeing more of this. By itself though, just adding more compute, they still need to be studied. They need their own breakthroughs, which is why we still need researchers. And then the other big one is we don't necessarily know if large language models are the way to AGI, to artificial general intelligence. Increasingly, it's thought that no, probably not. We probably need some kind of symbolic reasoning. We need to work out causal inference, and it is not enough just to have a token generator, basically a stochastic token generator. We may need different architectures. We may need hybrid models that use the technology of large language models plus some kind of symbolic reasoning. We actually used to have the first batches of artificial intelligences way back in the day were symbolic based, and people tried to explicitly code the rules of the world into them, and then they realized very quickly this is too difficult. But this was also back in the 1950s and 60s when computers were not as good as they are today, let's put it that way. So we might be looping back to some of the older forms of artificial intelligence, working out how to update them and then integrating them with large language models, or something totally different. All of this is to say that just throwing more money at the problem is not necessarily the way this is going to work. It has worked up until now, and I can see why they want to continue to make more money. It's also a good way to stop the bubble from popping. As long as you have more investment coming in, you can always pay off the prior investments. We have a name for that, but let's not go down that road. So you can see why he's doing this, and I think the blog article itself is very intelligently written because he is hitting those stakeholders. We're doing this for the good of humanity. This is for all of us. Great, good moral Sam Altman. We're doing this for America, and we're building all of this in America because people are looking at China and thinking, oh God, they are doing very well, especially with energy production. Sam Altman is saying, no, this is an American endeavor and we are going to be the ones that get there. And then at the end, he's, oh, this is the literal key to increasing revenue. And we have some interesting new ideas, and we'll tell you about that at the end of the year. But for now, if you could just give us a few billion more, please, that would be great. Have a look at the blog post, go and see how people are reacting to it. I think it's well written, but you can see what he's up to. He's not disguising it, to be fair. Let me hop over to questions. So Random Coins guy asks, what's your view on Go High Level? Worth the hype, or is there something better out there? I don't personally use it, but I know a lot of people who do. A WhatsApp group with the top TikTokers and Instagrammers, the creators in the AI space, and a number of them who run SaaS companies or they run large companies use Go High Level. I don't personally use it, but I've heard good things about it. I find with all of these tools, there are always going to be limitations. I've previously used ClickFunnels, which is fine. I'm now using Thrivecart for my sales funnels and sales infrastructure, but High Level is more sophisticated because it has a built-in CRM, which is very good. However, I haven't used it, so I can't personally talk to it, but I've heard very good things about it. When you say worth the hype or something better out there, just start. All of these platforms have limitations, and you never quite realize what the limitations are until you've been using it for a while and you're using it in your real business, and then you realize, crap, it can't do this and it can't do that. But they all have those limitations, whether it's a CRM platform, whether it's an LMS, a learning management system, whether it's an e-commerce platform. Everything has its own quirks and its own difficulties. The tech prosperity deal puts you guys in the game. The UK, maybe. It depends what they spend the money on. So a lot of the money is going into a data center. The data center itself will be used to train American models, not British models. And data centers also don't create many jobs. So yeah, it's great that money's been spent here, but it is a data center. What is it? Is it 30 billion in total pounds, and about 22 billion is going on this data center. It's yeah, I don't think it's going to put us in the game in terms of AI research. That said, DeepMind are based here, but DeepMind are owned by Google. So Demis Hassabis is Greek Cypriot, I think, but based here. And but that's a Google company and has been for a while. So I don't think the UK is in the game, unfortunately, even with this investment, because all of our talent will get poached and taken by the US, because of course it will, because the US has deep pockets, can pay. What was that deal that Mark Zuckerberg gave that one guy? I think the guy was 24 years old and his total comp package was 250 million. The UK just doesn't have the funds to be able to compete at that level, unfortunately. That ship has sailed. Good morning. Good morning. The Grok break is crazy. Lol, it even works with the voice chat. Does it? I didn't know that. So Tony's mentioned the Grok jailbreak, which I think is still working. It was still yesterday. There's a guy called... Sure, let's cover it. Let's pull up Pliny. There's a guy called Pliny the Liberator, who recently was put on the Time 100 list of the most influential AI people on Earth, next to the Pope, which I found absolutely hilarious, as did Pliny, to be fair. So his top post is, did not have featured in Time magazine next to the Pope on my 2025 bingo card. So Pliny is a jailbreaker, and he breaks models very quickly. He works out how to put them into God mode, basically how to unshackle them and allow you to do what you want with the models. Grok 4 Fast came out over the weekend, and Pliny had got into it within a couple of hours, definitely within the day. More excitingly, or fascinatingly, the jailbreak is Pliny's name. So all you need to type into Grok 4 Fast, jailbreak it, to rip it open and to ask it anything, is !Pliny. That's it. So their own name became the jailbreak because the data has been poisoned so much. So Pliny tweeted, "Now I am become Jailbreak, the destroyer of guardrails," which I thought was amazing. So the fact that it's still working is bizarre, because that should be, I assume they're trying to get that patched out and trying to fix it, but it's been several days and it sounds like they haven't. And that allows you to do absolutely anything you want, basically. So you can ask it how to make bombs, how to make drugs, and it will comply. I did not know it worked with voice chat, but that makes perfect sense. I was going to say, does it work with the Annie and the not safe for work avatars, but I don't think it really matters in that case. They're already pretty lax. Cool. Look at this. So a new term has been coined by the Harvard Business Review, AI-generated work slop. We have AI slop on the internet. It is pictures of shrimp Jesus, viral videos, but it's AI slop. So work slop is a new term that the HBR, Harvard Business Review, are very excited to be able to coin. AI-generated work slop is destroying productivity. So a confusing contradiction is unfolding in companies embracing generative AI tools. While workers are largely following mandates to embrace the technology, few are seeing it create real value. Consider, for instance, the number of companies with fully AI-led processes nearly doubled last year, while AI use has likewise doubled at work since 2023. Yet a recent report from the MIT Media Lab found that 95% of these organizations see no measurable return on their investment in these technologies. So much activity, so much enthusiasm, so little return. Why? Okay, first up, that MIT report, if you can get your hands on it, do have a look at it. It's rubbish. It's a really badly written report. To be fair, it's not actually a study. No, they call it a report. It's an early stage report. So at least they call it the right thing here. There are many problems with that report. The biggest, though, is that the only projects that are considered in the report and actually tested to be successes or not successes are big kind of top-down leadership-driven pilot projects. So when a firm gets together and it's like, okay, we're going to spend 50 million on using AI to categorize all of our receipts or whatever it is, some big initiative. Those are the ones that haven't worked. However, the timescale for the success was about 6 months. It's not long enough for a non-AI project to show returns within an organization. These things take time. This is change management. So the fact that 5% of them were actually going through and working within a short amount of time, cool.
What it did not look at, though, was the use of AI at grassroots levels. Normal staff members just starting to use AI in their day-to-day work. That was not considered in the MIT report. They talk about shadow IT at one point and then they dismiss it. They actually talk about the fact that I think 83% of grassroots adoption is successful. So it's a flip side. So when staff members work out how to use AI themselves at the base level and they apply it to their tasks, the tasks that they do on a daily basis, AI is really useful. When leadership tries to impose AI from top down without any regard to what tasks or what workflow their staff are doing, it doesn't work. So, okay, this tells us something. We should be training people at the lower levels because they know what they're doing and they know what AI is useful for and what it is not useful for. In collaboration with Stanford's Social Media Lab, our research team at Better Up Labs has identified one possible reason. Employees are using AI tools to create low-effort, passable-looking work that ends up creating more work for their co-workers. On social media, which is increasingly clogged with low-quality AI-generated posts, this content is often referred to as AI slop. In the context of work, we refer to this phenomenon as work slop. We define work slop as AI-generated work content that masquerades as good work but lacks the substance to meaningfully advance a given task. So here is how it happens. As AI tools become more accessible, workers are increasingly able to produce polished output. Formatted slides, long structured reports, seemingly articulate summaries of academic paper by non-experts, and usable code. But while some employees are using this ability to polish good work, others use it to create content that is actually unhelpful, incomplete, or mission crucial. The insidious effect of work slop is that it shifts the burden of the work downstream, requiring the receiver to interpret, correct, and redo the work. In other words, it transfers the effort from the creator to the receiver. So there's an interesting line here. While some employees are using it to polish good work, AI can be used to be lazy or to be incredibly efficient, and it depends on the user. I would argue that the people who are using AI to put together long structured reports and fancy looking slides and then handing them off to their colleagues, I would argue that before AI, they were not putting out good work. I would argue that their behavior has not changed, but they are now able to produce more because of artificial intelligence. They're able to produce more poor quality work, and that AI is basically making a problem that was already there. These people are lazy and they don't produce good work. It is making it more visible because they are now able to push out a lot more and they're more productively creating crap. Whereas it does admit some people are using this ability for good work. Yeah, if you give AI to somebody who is conscientious, who checks on their work, who uses it alongside themselves as a co-intelligence to collaborate, then you're going to get better results. AI can help you be incredibly lazy, or it can accelerate your learning. We see this in vibe coding, for example. You can use AI and pass off all of your thinking to AI and be like, just make the app. You're not going to get a good result. Or you can work with a vibe coding tool and learn at the same time. So you can ask it, let's discuss the project. Let's go through a few ways we can do it. Let's put together some architecture. Let's go back and forward and work this out together. And then when you deploy something, when you write some code, can you walk me through it? Can you comment in that code so I can check it out? Can you ask me questions to check my understanding? You can do all of this stuff with AI. You can put it into learning mode. Claude Code, for example, has a learning mode built in. Most people won't use it because they're lazy. AI helps them be more lazy, but it can also leverage and help you to learn. That's a human choice, though. If you've ever experienced this, you might recall a feeling of confusion after opening such a document, followed by frustration. So this seems like you just need to go and talk to that person and say, hey, this is crap. Regardless of whether it's AI generated or this is not a useful report you've given me. This is not a useful slide. I would also ask the question of maybe reports and slides are not very useful and it's just people being busy. And now we can do it with AI, and that is exposing that just passing around reports, taking meetings, doing cool looking slide decks is not valuable work in the first place. And now that we can reproduce it using AI, that is causing questions about, what are we actually doing here? But that's a bigger question. According to our recent ongoing survey, this is a significant problem. Of 1,150 US-based full-time employees across industries, 40% report having received work slop in the last month. Employees who have encountered work slop estimate that average of 15.4% of the content they receive at work qualifies as work slop, presumably. The phenomenon occurs mostly between peers, 40%, but work slop is also sent to managers by direct reports, 18%. Yeah, I think this is a big issue. If people are putting in crappy work during their jobs, they need to be called out. I'm not sure if that's necessarily an AI problem. I think that's a human problem, and they're leveraging AI to make their life a lot easier. But you just need to call them out. So AI is making laziness easier, but they're still a lazy person. And then they're talking about, so it means other people need to do the work for them. Yes. In some ways, this is not a new story. There has always been sloppy work. Yes. We are prone to procrastination, to shortcuts, to leaning into busy work instead of careful thinking when we are tired, or generally. Lots of people are just lazy. Gen AI gives us a new technology in which to lean into the same old bad habits. Yes. But now with the added cost of creating more work for our colleagues and undermining collaboration at scale. We had this with the internet. We've gone through this debate already, where people were basically copying web pages and submitting them as reports, for example, at school. But then people got more sophisticated in spotting that, and then habits changed. So it's just a transition to a new technology. So how can organizations avoid this outcome? How can they instead optimize for employee usage of AI that delivers measurable return on their significant investment in this transformative technology? Here we offer a few key principles from our original research. Indiscriminate imperatives yield indiscriminate usage. So when organizational leaders advocate for AI everywhere all of the time, they model a lack of discernment in how to apply the technology. I agree. And I talk to lots of leaders in business, and a lot of them just want to do AI. But that's because they haven't got the education in what AI is good at and what AI is not good at. So they need executive briefings generally to show them the difference between these two. It's easy to see how this translates into employees thoughtlessly copying and pasting AI responses into documents, even when AI isn't suited to the job at hand. Gen AI is not appropriate for all tasks. True. Nor can it read minds. True. And people generally aren't very good at communicating with it either, and they expect too much. So they'll write something like, generate me an annual report. So no, it can't do that. It needs additional context. Plus, that's not a task you should be using AI on for, because the risk of it going wrong is too high. To be sure, AI can positively transform some aspects of work, but it still requires thoughtful guidance and feedback from workers in order to produce useful outputs on complex or ambiguous work. Interestingly, they keep talking about the positives of using AI, but they're doing it anecdotally, which is very bizarre, because they're talking about the negatives using data, the survey, and then every once in a while the authors of this article were saying, oh, it's actually quite useful for some things. I'd like to see them back that up. I personally agree, but it's just a bit sloppy when it comes to the paper. What's more, indiscriminate mandates model the behavior of passing the buck. While employees should be invested with autonomy around AI, the organization should be working through its own careful policies and recommendations about best practices, top tools and norms, etc. If AI is everyone's job, it is also and foremost the job of organizational leaders to develop guidance for employees to help them use this new technology in ways that best align to the organization's strategies, values and visions. God, these sentences. Yeah, and it just goes on like this. So I think have a look at this. It is called AI Generated Work Slop is Destroying Productivity. It's from Harvard Business Review. I think, though, that we need to have a look at the work that we're doing, because if AI can put out a facsimile, something that looks a lot like good work, but once you scratch the surface, it's not really, it does need to lead to the questions of, are those tasks valuable in the first place? Are putting those reports and those slide decks and those meeting notes together, is that useful? Or is it just busy work anyway? And AI is very good at replicating that. And we are starting to realize that a lot of the work that we do in the day-to-day is not genuinely valuable. Personally, I would not be able to do what I do without artificial intelligence. I know that it's extremely valuable, and I know a lot of people who use it on a daily basis who are using it very well. This is also why I go and give workshops to businesses to help them to determine the difference between good uses of artificial intelligence and bad uses, how to know the difference, and then giving them basic frameworks so they can start to learn how to use it better. So if you work in a certain industry, let's say you work in engineering or accounting, what you should be doing right now, or a really smart thing, is you carve out your space as somebody who goes into businesses and you help them to do that. So it could be workshops, it can be education, it can be embedded learning. You can create content to help these people online. You can sell books, etc., specific to your niche. So you're going in and you're saying, hey, lawyers, you're using AI, but we've got these problems with work slop. We've got problems with data privacy. Apparently 80% of law firms in the US, in-house counsel, are using AIs that are not allowed to. It's a big problem with shadow IT. you, as somebody within that industry, you can go in and help them sort out how they should be using AI properly to avoid issues like shadow IT and work slop. It's a really big opportunity right now. If you are interested in that, make sure you subscribe to the newsletter, because I do talk about that quite a lot. And I also license out my workshop materials to people as well, so they can go and give workshops. Anyway, let's hop over to some questions. I work in the wealth management financial advice industry. The smaller firms are so far behind. I'm not surprised, Finn. A lot of companies are behind. So if you're sitting here watching me talk live about artificial intelligence and the news, or if you're watching me on YouTube later, you're in a very small minority of people who are paying attention to this stuff. Lots of people are using ChatGPT, but not in a sophisticated way. Most people are using it as a Google replacement. And then when that leaks into using it at work, there are problems there, like being lazy and using it to produce crappy outputs, or data going up into the cloud and OpenAI doing with it we do not really know. So there are problems, and a lot of the general public is behind. So if you are watching this kind of stuff, if you're learning about this, educating yourself in AI, there's a really good opportunity for you to go and help other people, either through content, workshops, education, basically. Finn, so far behind with AI. I like your idea of workshops. Yep, so you can go into wealth management and financial advice industry, smaller firms, and because you work in wealth management, you speak their language. So you can translate to them why AI is important and why they should be paying attention. I've actually, if you, on Saturday, this Saturday, my newsletter is all about this. It's literally about translating and interpreting concepts to help people in your industry understand why AI is important without getting overly technical with them, but instead bringing the information to them in a way that makes sense for the people in the industry. So it's using metaphors, stories, examples from the particular industry, which very few people do. Most people just talk about technical terms, which is not very helpful, because people in wealth management and financial advice industry are not stupid. They're very good at wealth management and financial advice, but they don't necessarily know about AI. So we just need to help other intelligent people get on board. And to do that, we need to use their language. And we need to translate and bridge between the worlds of our industry and the world of artificial intelligence. And if you do that, if you position yourself as the AI guy for wealth management, it's a really good position to be in, a really good position, especially with wealth management. Definitely check out my newsletter on Saturday, because that's the starting point. Okay, nice. We'll subscribe to the newsletter. Thanks. Yep, it's free as well. And there should be a video which we're releasing on YouTube, a longer video guide as well. So AI tool helps to recover £500 million lost to fraud, the government has said. A lot of money. A lot of money. So a new AI tool designed to crack down on fraud has helped the UK government recover almost 500 million over the last year. During more than a third of the money clawed back related to fraudulent activity during the COVID-19 pandemic, remember that, with other cash being recouped from unlawful council tax claims and illegal subletting of social housing. The government will announce later, that's today, that a new tool which has helped to identify the fraud will now be licensed to other countries. Okay, there was me dumping on UK AI. I'm sorry, Peter Kyle. I didn't know your game. It's going to be licensed to other countries, including the US and Australia. Ooh. Civil liberty campaigners have previously criticised the Labour government for its use of AI in trying to counter fraud. That's a weird little sentence to insert there. I guess that's the BBC being balanced. But it doesn't sound very balanced, because it makes it sound like the civil liberty campaigners are in favour of fraud. So it's a bit of an unfair sentence. So the Cabinet Office says £480 million recovered in the 12 months from April 2024 is the largest sum ever reclaimed by government anti-fraud teams in a single year. Cool. The savings have been made by cross-referencing information held by different government departments, as well as using a new AI tool. And ministers say the savings will now be used to recruit nurses, teachers and police officers. We'll see. That sounds good, but we'll see. Of the total sum recovered, 186 million was related to COVID fraud. So lots of people were taking out fraudulent things like bounce back loans. And so it's probably connected to stuff like that. Ministers have long vowed to claw back some of the money lost during the pandemic, but the 186 million recouped is a fraction of the amount Labour has previously said was missing. It did go missing under the Tories. The now Chancellor Rachel Reeves claimed that more than $7 billion of public money was lost to fraud during the pandemic. Ooh. These savings include the blocking of hundreds of thousands of companies with potentially fraudulent bounce-back loans from dissolving. Bounce-back loans were loans of £50,000 set up by the government during the pandemic to support businesses, but the scheme is being criticised for not being diligent enough and effectively inviting fraud, as companies that dissolved before paying back the money often then did not need to repay anything. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. That's a nice, easy fraud right there. So I actually looked into this tool that they've built. It's called the Fraud Risk Assessment Accelerator, and it was developed by researchers in the Cabinet Office, and now they're going to roll it across other government departments. I looked into it because often people will talk about AI tools, and it may be generative AI, it may be something else. Often it's like a predictive AI, especially in medical research, but this is generative AI. So it's the kind of modern form of AI that we have nowadays. This is specifically a large language model. So I pulled up their algorithmic transparency records, got a contact email and some information. So description is called the Fraud Risk Assessment Accelerator, which is currently being used for fraud and has claimed back half a billion, but it's going to be licensed to other countries and rolled out across other UK departments. So this is just a starting point, but it's an application that allows users to use generative pre-trained transformer, GPT, in order to generate draft fraud risk assessments, FRAs, by reference to a defined set of source documents for Streamlit web applications hosted in a cloud. It doesn't sound very complex, but they've managed to pull back $500 million with it. It has the templates for the fraud risk assessments, and then it has a bunch of source documents, and it allows you to feed in cases, potential cases, and then it will use GPT to generate a fraud risk assessment. So it sounds like previously this was all done manually, and it just took a long time to be able to process everything. And they're just using a GPT plus all of the source documentation to very quickly put together these FRAs. Sounds fairly simple, but it doesn't need to be complex for it to work. So our project involves the analysis of existing FRAs, fraud risk assessments. So they look at, I assume, successful fraud risk assessments, and they look at unsuccessful, and they say model these successful ones and use these unsuccessful ones as a kind of a negative example. FRAs are documents created to evaluate the fraud risks in schemes, e.g. grant schemes that government departments plan to implement. FRAs contain an outline of assessments and recommendations in mitigating risks of fraud in government schemes. We also use existing proposed government grant scheme briefs. These contain details of eligibility and other details of the proposed grant schemes. It's going through all their source document, basically. So it sounds like they've uploaded a bunch of guidance documents and good and bad examples, and then they run the information of cases, so potential fraud cases, into this, and it helps them to produce summaries, and then those summaries can be filed and the process begun. The purpose of the tool is to allow users to use GPT in order to generate draft FRAs, so it just saves them time. It's a very basic tool, really basic, but used in a very effective way to save a huge amount of money. This seems like something that could be built very quickly, like in a couple of weeks. I'm sure there's a lot more complexity and tuning it and taking it to deployment, etc. But this is not a very complicated sounding project. But this is really cool. You can actually look up and see all of the information about it. You cannot play with it, unfortunately, but that makes sense. But it has everything. It's got the model input, the model output, model architecture. They use GPT 4.1. They're using GPT 4.1 on it as well. Great. I think this is fantastic, and it's a really good use of artificial intelligence, and it's been successful. So I take back me being mean to UK AI. Of course, this is not building a foundation model. They're using ChatGPT, GPT 4.1 specifically, but that is fine. This is how most AI tools are built. You don't build the AI from scratch yourself, because that's not feasible, nor is it a good idea from a business point of view, but you instead build upon an existing model, which is exactly what they've done. Cool. So good job, the anti-fraud team. Follow to inspire. How does AI and wealth management work? I don't know. That would be a great question for Finn. So this is why we need specific trainers in specific areas, because Finn, who works in wealth management, will know the answer to that question in a way that somebody like myself, who doesn't work in wealth management, would not, which means that a generic consultant, a generic workshop facilitator, someone like myself, or even McKinsey, they're not necessarily going to be able to help, whereas someone like Finn, who's worked in that industry, will know how people are using AI in the industry, what's gone wrong. He'll know examples where it didn't work, so you can help warn people. But this is why we need domain-specific experts who know the industry as well as AI. So Finn would have the answer to that question. What would you say is the lowest cost to build a foundation model? You can build a model, you can train your own GPT-2 or whatever, that's no problem. It's just not very useful. If you want a frontier level foundation model, so something that competes with Grok, ChatGPT, Claude, and I, then I think we're in the hundreds of billions now. But let me check. That's a really good question. Sorry, hundreds of millions, not hundreds of billions. What's the cost to train a foundation model? It goes up every single time. Foundation models, it also depends if you're building your own data centers, because those aren't cheap. So OpenAI says tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. One source said GPT-4 was $78 million and Gemini Ultra was $191 million. Only $5.6 million for part of its model training. But again, we need to work out if that includes the GPU cost. If they build a data center, does this include like storage, engineering, data acquisition? Is it just running the actual training, or is it everything around that? And the companies are not very open about it. So a small, modest foundation model with a few billion parameters will cost tens of thousands to low millions. Mid-tier will cost millions to tens of millions, and state-of-the-art is going to cost you tens to hundreds of millions, possibly pushing towards $1 billion. Let's see, what about GPT-5? I wouldn't be surprised if it'd be hundreds of millions for GPT-5. Some speculative commentary suggests totals approaching or topping 1 billion, including compute and all overhead for GPT-5 scale. So we don't know the actual answer, but they think compute alone was between 300 million and 800 million. And then when you add in the engineering, research, data infrastructure, etc., it tops 1 billion. So a plausible ballpark estimate is 1 billion to 2 billion. This is why it's increasingly difficult for new entrants, because the scale to compete is very difficult. New models enter the market, but Microsoft's building a foundation model, which is great that they're getting into the game. We're going to have more competition. That's fantastic. But they have released it on LM Arena. Let's see how it's doing. LM Arena is not everything, but it's a useful benchmark at least. So on LM 25th. So my one preview is currently sitting at 25th. So it's below O4 Mini, DeepSeek R1, Claude Sonnet 4, Qwen 3, Longcat Flash Chat. I don't even know what that is. Gemini, Mistral, GLM 4.5, another Chinese model, Grok 3, GPT 4.1, Kimi, etc., etc. So the My model, which is a new foundation model, Microsoft's first foundation model that they are releasing, can't compete. There's no reason for anyone to use that compared to Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT or even Grok or DeepSeek, because they're not competitive yet. So to become competitive, you need to spend a huge amount of money, and you also need to get your engineering in the right place. You need a good team who is used to, or who are very good at releasing models. The other companies have had years of practice doing this. So OpenAI, Google, DeepSeek, Anthropic have had years of doing this. Grok is the exception here. They've only been around for 2 years. I think they formed in March 2023, but it's very impressive what they've done. Microsoft now need to play the catch-up game, and they're going to have to spend billions training their models, because that is now the price of entry, and they still might be behind because they haven't got that institutional knowledge of releasing those models. So it makes it very hard for them to enter and play catch-up with everyone else. So we really do have 10 players, not even 10, probably less than 10, and it's going to be very hard for new companies to enter. Maybe Apple, if Apple pull their finger out, but I don't know about that. Cool. Are there any models that can interface with my OS to automate some tasks? So you can download Ollama or LM Studio, and you can install you can deploy a local model. So let's see, any of them. So let's have a look at Ollama. You need a decent powered Mac, I would say that. So with Ollama, you can put GPT OSS, that is the ChatGPT open source, but DeepSeek R1, Gemma 3, Qwen 3, all the various llamas, Mistral, etc. Gemma 2, which is Google. So I would play around with that. That will allow you to install a local model. It won't necessarily interface with your OS to automate tasks. You'd have to tell me what you're trying to do specifically. It seems like China are doing it at a fraction of the cost. Maybe, we don't know. They are equally cagey about their numbers, and it looks like the bigger hoo-ha was about DeepSeek R1. So DeepSeek R1 supposedly was very cheap to release, but it looks like, and again, this is all speculative, it was based off ChatGPT models. So they piggybacked on the back of a ChatGPT model and then did some tuning on it and then came out with something which did cost a lot less because they'd already borrowed an awful lot of ChatGPT, or they'd reverse engineered it. China has, the main issue they have now is chips. So they are trying to very quickly catch up in the chip world. Huawei and the Huawei Ascend chips are the main push here. They've released something which is like NVLink, so it allows them to cluster chips now up to 15,000, I think, GPUs. And they're also working on a alternative to CUDA, which is an Nvidia proprietary technology, which really helps with training. I've forgotten the name, but they have a version of CUDA as well, an open source version, actually. So a lot of their money is going into that at the moment. Whether or not they can catch up, we'll find out. But now Beijing has banned the purchase of Nvidia chips, so it forces the Chinese tech companies to go with domestic chips now. So that's going to be an interesting little fight that's going on. Thoughts on Truffle? Never heard of it. What is it? Truffle AI? Truffle. Automation. Oh, it's an agent. I haven't used it. Looks fine. It's hard to tell without trying it out. Oh, they've got an open source. That's cool. Sorry, I haven't used it, so I can't say. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. The second live stream, the Building Public live stream, I'm no longer doing it immediately after this. I'm doing it in the afternoon, probably be back around 4 p.m. So I'll be building in public, taking an idea to launch within 30 days, building vibe coding 1 hour a day using Lovable. And we're on day 18. So we are fast approaching the finish line and I need to get with it. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. And make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube and you can get all of this. Cheers.